Welcome to The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. On Zoom with me right now is Mark Glennon. He is the founder and CEO of wirepoints.org. Wirepoints is a think tank. They put out a lot of good policy pieces. I've actually been working with Mark on a variety of issues for probably about a decade now, and he was my go-to guy when I found something that was problematic in legislation. I would send it to Mark and say, what can you write about this? What do you know about it? By background, Mark is a bankruptcy lawyer, so he knows a lot about that, and he also knows a lot about investing. He's been a watchdog for what's happening fiscally in not just the city of Chicago, but around the entire state of Illinois. For example, I had Mark Glennon come down and testify on a bankruptcy bill because we have a number of municipalities, including the Rockford mayor at that time, who literally said that Rockford was bankrupt. I have a statement still that I've kept to this day from the Danville mayor at that time who said, "We are bankrupt." Well, we also know that the city of Chicago literally is bankrupt. I mean, right now, the latest information that we have is that they have about $34 billion in unfunded pension liability. That's a massive amount of money that they will have no way to pay off. But they've been put on a glide path, a way that they do have to pay off some of those pensions, and it is really hampering their ability to pay for other services, core services that you guys expect. So the latest thing that Mayor Lightfoot has wanted to do, and why I really wanted to have Mark on this program with me today, is the mayor's trying to, pony up some good ideas she thinks ahead of her election coming in April, runoff in, the runoff would be in April. With the primary in February. And so she's come up with this idea of social bonds. Now, this is really important, so pay attention here. These social bonds that she wants to tee up to pay for trees and homeless sheltering of the homeless and low-income housing and other initiatives, these social bonds, she wants to use a special fund called the Sales Tax Securitization Fund, which is actually a nonprofit fund. She wants to use that fund to pay for these social bonds because she has no other way to pay for them. The city's pretty much tapped out on their bonding authority, at a reasonable interest rate. So I'm having Mark Glennon on because the securitization of the sales tax revenue to give the city a higher limit on a credit card, essentially, is a problem. And Mark and I talked about this when that fund was first developed. And everybody beware, because in law, not only can Chicago do it, but other municipalities can do it. And it's a scary proposition for them to sell off the seed corn. Just as a way of thinking about this, remember Chicago sold off the Skyway for about $2 billion. Then they sold off their parking meters for about $1 billion. And now they have sold their future sales tax revenue. Mark Glennon, welcome to the program. Can you explain in probably better language and more detail than I just did about what is going on here with this securitization fund and these social bonds?
Sure, and it helps to tell a little history in this. I think it goes back to 2017. Jeannie, I got an email from you. You were sitting, like a few of the legislators do, actually watching what's going on in the General Assembly, and you say, "What is this? This new bill?" Well, there was a bill pending, drafted by somebody in the municipal bond industry very carefully to create this new form of lending, the intention of which is to make a mortgage or lien to secure the bonds bulletproof even in bankruptcy, because bond buyers, the bond community, is worried about Illinois municipalities going bankrupt. So the concept is that future revenues, as you say, get actually sold off. Full ownership transfers to a new entity, and it's actually not even a fund of the city. It's called a bankruptcy remote entity. The Chicago Sales Tax Security Corporation is the one that was created in the case of Chicago. And I like your analogy of seed corn. We've tried to explain it in different ways, like selling off body parts. Or imagine going into the bank and the bank saying, "Look, you're not creditworthy. I'm afraid you're going to go into bankruptcy." And you say, "Well, okay, how about if I transfer full ownership to you of my future income? And we'll figure out a way to kick back the proceeds of the loan so that I get used to it." Well, that's the entire intention of this. And it's a familiar concept to those of us in bankruptcy. not often used by municipalities and governments, only used by ones that are really facing a threat of bankruptcy and concern from the lenders. Well, you pretty much had that bill killed in early 17,
Hmm.
but then in that big omnibus BIMP and budget bill that they do in the last moments of the session, they stuck it in there, and it went through without anybody really paying attention to it. Barbara Flynn Curry, by the way, the sponsor of the original bill, the House floor leader at the time, lied about it. She was asked about this
Hmm.
bankruptcy intention. She said she was the sponsor. She said she didn't know anything about that. Well, it's expressed in the bill. It's, talks about bankruptcy and the purpose of it. So anyway, it became law, and pursuant to that, Chicago then transferred essentially all of its future sales tax revenue to this new entity.
Hmm.
And as I say, it kickbacks the portions of the loans that new entity makes. So these new bonds and other bonds that the city has already been selling are secured by that. The issuer of the bonds, the borrower, is actually that new entity, not the city. So if you go look at the materials for this new social bond offering, um, you'll find that it's not the city that's the issuer, it's that new entity. Um,
Mark, let me stop you there for a minute. Do you happen to know what type of rating they get? I mean, I guess Chicago just moved out of junk territory. So, but what about this special corporation? What's their rating?
It'll be rated very highly. I don't know the
Okay.
specific ratings, but it's secured, and I don't mean to belittle the quality of these bonds, because there is this mortgage, a very carefully drafted mortgage that's designed to hold up in bankruptcy, and it secures those future revenues. And sales tax revenues are coming into Chicago. When the muni bond people look at this, they look at the issue of how much capacity, that's their word for it, how much capacity is there still to borrow against this base of collateral. So this is a secured loan. There's variations in how much security there are. There are a range of different bonds that are in this social bond program that are being offered. So if you look at it, you have to be specific about which
Hmm.
one you're looking at. But it'll probably be rated pretty well. I personally wouldn't worry about any default risk on
Right.
it,
Hmm.
and that's why they did it.
A little bit of background, a little more background is really important here because the reason that they even had to set up such a corporation and essentially lean their future sales tax revenue is because they're not a credit worthy city. I mean, they have massive. They had first of all, they were given a 5-year reprieve from getting their pensions in line with other municipalities in the state. So everybody else kind of had to start on this 40-year ramp, have all their pensions paid off by 2040, and then Chicago's like, well, we're not ready for that. So they got a 5-year reprieve from that, and then starting really in 2020, 2021 timeframe, they basically had to double their pension payment to their funds, and they've been given to like 2056, long past when the other pension funds have to be 90% funded. They don't have to be 90% funded until 2056. But even then, that's really, really been a struggle for them. So I was kind of shocked to read in another article that she's having to use a securitization company to do what she wants to do because they can't even make their current pension plan payment. Is that what I was told? She had to use other funds just recently, just in January, because they were not going to be able to even pay out retirees. So she put another $512 million pension payment ahead of time, just recently, just this month, because retirees weren't going to get paid. Did you read about that?
I did, and to some extent, there's a partial excuse for that. If you remember, there was a delay in
Yes.
sending the Cook County property tax payment, so a big chunk of the city's revenue was held up. But it illustrates, as the articles on that have said, how thin a margin the city is operating on. That delay caused that problem, and so they got squeezed on it, and they'll collect the property tax revenue eventually. But that was the issue.
So, and speaking of property taxes, also according to this Bloomberg article that I was reading, essentially said that 80% of the Chicago the city's property taxes collected go only to pay pensions, and another 10% of the property taxes collect go only to pay additional debt. I mean, they're not in good shape.
Pensions are the 800-pound gorilla. We've stopped talking about them for
We
some
did.
reason in the past few years, and the problem has only gotten worse. It's going to come back with a vengeance as soon as all this federal money dries up.
Well, and let's remind folks, shamefully, Don Harmon sat there and lectured. He basically lectured his colleagues at his inaugural address. Hey, do the right thing or get out. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, his entire party is under a big corruption scandal with the leader of all of them, Mike Madigan, indicted and facing, a trial by jury. And then you have a number of his members that have actually been put in jail, like Tom Cullerton out here, or are facing indictment charges, bribery charges themselves, or domestic abuse like Michael Hastings. But let's remember Don Harmon's other shameful statement, and that was at the beginning of COVID, asking federal taxpayers for a $42 billion payoff, not knowing that they were going to get billions of dollars of COVID relief, but asking for it ahead of time, trying to basically game the system for COVID relief before it even came up. I mean, this is also unethical, in my opinion, to be asking that from the
Yeah,
federal.
that got national headlines when he made that request. Give him
Mhm.
some credit for a little honesty, actually, because that's kind of the number that they probably would have needed to right the ship at least temporarily is 42 billion. They didn't get that much from the federal government, but they got enough to hold them over, and for Pritzker and the rest to crow about how they've righted the ship, and they haven't.
So it's interesting. Then you went on to write, and this is a great article. I think every legislator should read it, and I think every legislator should be listening to this thing because I don't think there's a lot of new legislators. There's been a lot of turnover. They don't even know that Chicago sold off. I think it's 30% of their sales tax revenue.
All of it. I mean,
Oh, all of it.
essentially,
Okay.
you have both the portion that they collect directly, and then some of it is collected by the state. It goes back to the city. That's transferred. Yeah.
Okay, so it's all transferred to this special fund. It can't be used for any other services. They're not going to use
Right.
it for road repair. They're not going to use it, for example, taking care of water pipes or anything like that, right?
That's
So
right. Now, there's some bells and whistles attached, some ifs and buts. If they end up collecting more than they need to service the bond, some of the excess gets kicked back. But by the way, the right to that excess is even leaned up. So, we'll see.
So you wrote this article this week. Chicagoans will get what the city says is a special chance to invest in their own city and to do social justice while they're at it. You write, they're called Chicago social bonds, but Chicagoans would be surprised if they understood how these bonds really work. And then you talked about them paying off their future sales tax revenue. So, it sounds like she picked out a few special things that she wanted done, correct? She said she wanted to take care of, greening the landscape, apparently. She wants to take care of, she wants 2,000 units of affordable housing. She wants emergency shelters. She wants to clean up and sell 5,000 vacant city lots. She wants to replace 200 of the city's gas-powered vehicles with electric vehicles. So she's really, she is. This is social bonding. This is for special projects. Meanwhile, they're looking at still around 400,000 lead pipes that will cost the city upwards of $8 billion, for which they have a 50-year plan to get rid of them or to replace them. And she's not putting any money towards something that really matters.
That's a scary one, by the way, the lead pipes. I spent a lot of time researching that. I chose eventually not to write about it because I still couldn't get good data that I was really comfortable with about how serious a health risk this is. And, because I think some of this is being brushed under the rug. So I didn't want to overstate it or understate it. But it's very scary. If I lived in a city, I'd certainly be testing my water, and it's going to be a lot of money to fix it. But you're right. I mean, this is on the fundamentals of the program. It's a marketing program designed to bring in buyers that believe in social justice mission. It's part of the whole ESG investing phenomenon, which is a big deal in the investing world, where a lot of people don't want to invest in fossil fuels or guns or tobacco or anything like that. They only want to invest in green energy and certain things like that. So a lot of different funds nationally and internationally have popped up to tap into that market of people who want to invest that way. And so you can call it a marketing gimmick, but if it works, I guess more power to the city. But you're right. A lot of this spending was going to be done anyway. The mayor has said that equity and social justice are the center of everything the city does.
Hmm.
She's talked about a lot of these things: vehicle electrification, affordable housing. All the rest have been part of her program. But so you select out a few of those things, earmark it, supposedly to be paid for by these bonds. But money's fungible. It all goes into the same pot at the city. So it's really just kind of window dressing to make some people feel happy about how they're investing in the city.
Meanwhile, the best thing you could do if you wanted to do some social investing is maybe invest in tax credit scholarships or getting these kids into private and charter schools.
Well, that's part of why this ESG thing is really under attack, because what social justice is in the eye of the beholder. So in different places with different viewpoints, they're not only reacting against this, but they're saying, hey, we have different ideas of social justice, and we're going to boycott your traditional ESG things, and we're going to invest in the things that we believe in. So a predictable mess has arisen over this, and pensions and city investors, the treasurer, they ought to be investing in what makes sense and keep the politics out of it, and maximize return. So
Well, they ought to
chalking
be working on fundamentals. That fundamentally the city is unsafe. Fundamentally, the schools do not educate the majority of kids. In fact, if they're lucky, if they educate 75% of the kids. Fundamentally, Chicago. I've been down to Chicago. It is not as clean as it used to be. The infrastructure is still crumbling as well. Fundamentally, it is bankrupt still. Fundamentally, it can't pay for its pensions. Fundamentally, it needs more police on the streets. They have major problems, and she's doing these gimmicks just during election time. I mean, when does the nonsense end, Mark? I mean, I thought we had seen maybe everybody's limit, but I must be wrong. I must be living in, I don't know, not
Well, he
reality.
gets away with it. In Illinois, Pritzker and Lightfoot, they just aren't subject to the scrutiny that they should have. And part of it is bias in the press. Part of it is that they don't understand the gravity of the financial risk that we face. So Pritzker just today was on MSNBC. He was over in Davos, Switzerland, of course, and he made a pitch to oh, it's not what you think in Illinois. We've turned the corner on crime. Everything is great. And, he's used to getting away with that stuff in
Mm-hmm.
Illinois.
Yep.
We'll see if he does in his presidential bid. I think it's going to be a little
Well,
tougher going than he's used to here in Illinois. So,
well, we know that that's not true. Listen, if you're listening to this program, it's Mark Glennon on. He's the founder of WirePoints. He's a bankruptcy lawyer by trade. He writes on a lot of different items, but one of the best things that you can do is you can sign up for their daily email list. And one of the articles that you link to today at wirepoints.org, go there, sign up for their email list. It'll pop up when you go to their website. And one of the articles that you did link about it, speaking of crime, carjackings reported in Lakeview and Rogers Park in Chicago, they see hijackings surge in the new year. So this is already it's just unbelievable that there's still already a spike just this year in carjackings. I mean, crime's not going down. Sorry.
right. There was some improvement last year in shootings and
Murders.
murders,
Mm-hmm.
which Lightfoot likes to talk about all the time. But other
Mm-hmm.
types of crime, armed robbery, especially, and carjackings, which are what really scare people, continue to be high. They're higher than the pre-pandemic levels, higher than 2019. And there's no signs of it abating. I see no genuine plan from the city to address it. Lightfoot says she's going to invest our way out of this. Some of that investment is legitimate and will help in the long term. Just locking everybody up. Nobody's saying that that's the sole solution to it. But boy,
No,
we got to do
nobody's saying
some of that, and you got to put a Band-Aid on things while you work on the long-term solutions.
Okay, before we let you go here, just last thing that I did want to cover. There's appears to be a relentless pursuit for everybody's pocketbook in this state. And so even though they got slammed with their trying to put a progressive tax in a few years ago, and that failed as a statewide constitutional referendum, they're back at it, right? They're biting at the apple again. Now there's a suggestion that there's going to be a wealth tax in the state. There's another suggestion that there's going to be a let's tax the millionaires. I mean, Madigan tried that in 2014. That went nowhere. So what's with it? Do they not understand that they are going against the trend that we see in so many other states where they are either going to they're taken from the progressive tax down to a flat tax. That's what Iowa's doing. Iowa is gradually lowering their tax to a flat tax, which will be lower than the state of Illinois. You've got other states completely eliminating income taxes. What is wrong with the water here in Illinois?
Yeah, 12 other states, Jeannie, are cutting taxes this year. A number of others are going to a flat tax. We got a twofer yesterday. But first, Senator Robert Markwick, as you said, thinks he's going to revive the flat tax, the progressive tax idea, which was defeated at the polls. But most shockingly, in a coordinated effort, legislators in 6 states are announcing on Thursday legislation for their states to impose a wealth tax. This is a retroactive tax on money that you've already earned. Presumably, it'll be imposed only on the wealthy. It's basically the idea that, we've heard at the federal sometimes by the extreme left for a wealth tax, but they've struck out at the federal level, so they've gone to the states instead. Well, doing it at the state level is particularly suicidal because people would just move to another state. And, we'll get the details on Thursday, but this one really takes the cake. It's the naivete of the left at its very worst. And we'll look forward to seeing the details on that one.
Well, I'm looking forward here because I did kind of bring this up. Speaker Welch, in his inauguration comments, mentioned that, where is it here? He believes in a system that should reward work, not wealth. Like, first of all, what does that phrase mean? First of all. And then second of all, you just elected the wealthiest politician in the entire United States, and you rewarded him with another term. So you rewarded wealth. I mean, these guys they're just so bad, so bad.
And in the meantime, they're pushing ahead with universal basic income programs that have no work requirement whatsoever. They count their success by how many more government dependency programs, how many more people they add to it. Obviously, they ought to be counting their success by how many people they lift out of that. And you never hear a word by that measure from them. And if they did, they'd be striking out big time.
Well, again, audience, you need to follow wirepoints.org. Mark Glennon, thank you so much for still being in the fight here in the state of Illinois. You guys are doing really good work there, and I appreciate your analysis always. And I hope that you guys get a really good relationship going with the new leaders on the Republican side in the House and the Senate. And I hope that you're able to pick apart some of this legislation and get them to basically read. They should actually read what you guys write on the House floor, and maybe we can win some arguments down there.
And the Democrats, hopefully someday too.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Thank you so much. Mark Glennon, wirepoints.org.